You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and coming off the heels of Monday Night Football between the Raiders and Cowboys, it's that time again where we take a look back at this week's action, ranking all the teams from worst to first, bottom of the league to the top of the league. So as always, I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts, your opinions on the rankings, anything you may agree and or disagree with. Maybe share your own top 5 or top 10 in that comment section down below. But like I said, we start from the bottom and work our way up. We'll just take a quick peek at last week's board just so everyone has a reference of where everyone stood going into this week, number 12 of the NFL now. We'll wipe the board clean and start with that bottom category, beginning with a team that has been hanging out there for quite some time now in the Tennessee Titans, followed by the Raiders, the Giants, the Browns, and then the Jets at the top of this category here. Nobody in this group has changed or moved. I think based off of everything we saw from everybody, I feel pretty confident about this group right now, so I decided to just let everyone kind of stay pat where they are. Titans, I definitely want to give them some credit for a team that literally could not run the ball in this game against Houston. You at least kept the game extremely close, and a team that's kind of fighting to get themselves into the playoffs right now with a lot on the line, taking it to them and making it a game that literally came down to the wire. I definitely need to tip my cap to that. It's extremely unfortunate, though, that Joey Sly banged that ball through the end zone to put Houston at the 35 towards the end of the game, ultimately putting Houston in a shorter field situation where, if you're kicking it into the kicking landing zone, whatever that thing is called for the kickoffs, they're the landing zone, and then getting them situated maybe somewhere along the lines of like the 20, the 25. That's an extra 10 yards that the Texans would have had to work with. They're probably not making that game-winning field goal, and we have at least overtime to discuss here, but we do not. I do think that Joey Sly kick going out of bounds, or ultimately deep into the back of the end zone, kind of cost them some serious field position and ultimately put the Texans in a good spot to steal that win there. Raiders above them, when you are on the butt end of letting the Dallas Cowboys defense that has looked the way it has for all season long to this point and making them look like a good defense, I think it about sums up where this team currently is at. It's very, very interesting to watch this team unfold the way it has this season, because I genuinely cannot believe that this is a Pete Carroll-led team right now, and I'm very curious as each loss continues to unfold for this team, if there's a real possibility that we see the Raiders ultimately move on from Pete Carroll. Like, I know it's only year number 1 of him trying to get this whole thing going and getting the show on the road, but the reality is Pete Carroll's not very young. He is by far the youngest coach in the NFL right now. So it's not like you have a ton of time to get this turned around and make it work. So there's a lot of uncertainty, in my personal opinion, regarding this team and where everything stands. I feel like a lot is potentially on the table this upcoming off season with just how bad this entire season has unfolded to this point. And even with some of the moves like trading away Jacoby Myers at the trade deadline kind of signaled. Above them, of course, the New York Giants. I will say, Mr. 30 for 30 himself, Jameis Winston, he almost did it for those Giants, man. And I kind of really wish that the Giants could have pulled off the upset there. Like, yeah, it would have hurt my picks record, but when a game gets going like that, and Jameis Winston is so likable and so easy to root for, and he's in the situation where he's in where, things are falling in your favor. The Packers starting quarterback and their starting running back had to exit the game at varying points throughout. You almost kind of want to see this upset happen and unfold. Ultimately, a late interception cost them the game from Jameis Winston. But I mean, listen, I don't really know what you could really expect from this Giants team, given what we've seen play out so far this year. Hopefully, you just get Jackson Dart back sooner rather than later. We see Mike Kafka maybe protect him a little bit better than we were seeing Brian Daboll in the offense previously, for his health and safety, of course, being the utmost of importance. But this is a Giants team. They're 2-9 for a reason. I don't expect a ton more wins left in the tank for them, even when Jackson Dart gets back. All I really want to see from this Giants team going forward is an offense that maybe looks a little bit more competent and just protecting Jackson Dart, being that he is supposed to be your franchise guy of the future. Browns right above them. Myles Garrett, man. I believe it is 10 sacks now in his last 3 games, on an absolute tear right now, getting after the quarterback. But the story as old as time right now, a Cleveland Browns offense ultimately just not able to really get anything going. Dylan Gabriel wasn't having much of a good game up until he had to get taken out due to injury. And then once Shedeur Sanders got in, it honestly got worse. And I don't want to sit here and just write off Shedeur because for what it's worth, it sounds like he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunity to work with any of these first team players. And also, from an outsider looking in, it doesn't really sound like Shedeur has been given much of a shake and opportunity at all to this point here. So now that it sounds like he has to be QB1 going into next week's game, he'll get an opportunity to prepare like a starter and be ready to go. But it did not look great in that game against the Baltimore Ravens for him. And, obviously not expecting to come in and be the guy for them, but Dylan Gabriel goes down, and it is your job as a backup to be ready and as prepared as possible. So we'll see what happens with him going forward. The jury is still very much out on him. I think there's a large crowd of people pointing and laughing and going, see, we told you so. I think it's way too early to say stuff like that, but I will definitely proceed with caution in what we have going on in Cleveland potentially unfolding. Jets after them to round out the category here. Another nightmare offensively for this team, ultimately leading now to the official benching of Justin Fields. A team that gave, I believe it was a 2-year, $40 million contract to Justin Fields is now moving on to Tyrod Taylor as the starting quarterback. It's really a shame. And honestly, the fact that you're in a situation right now where Jets fans, I feel for you. I want to make that abundantly clear. I detest the ownership over there and what's been going on in New York for the entirety of my life, and I can only imagine for some of you who have been fans for longer. But I will say this: it's a shame that some of the biggest stuff talked about regarding your team over the last month or so, and just most newsworthy headlines, is the fact that Woody Johnson is spearheading the cancellation of team report cards from the players. It's so par for the course that Woody Johnson is leading the charge on that it's unimaginable that's it's not unimaginable because it is what it is, and it's not surprising, but I can't believe that is the situation of this Jets team right now. Wishing you all the best, hoping for all the best moving forward, but now that you're sitting in a situation where you're hoping that Tyrod Taylor nets you some wins to finish off the year, I don't really know where this Jets team goes, but either here or lower than they already are, and there's not much room to go down from here. Moving into the next category, the Swirling the Toilet group. We have the Saints at the bottom, followed by the Commanders, the Bengals, the Cardinals, the Falcons, Dolphins, and then to round out the group, the Cowboys. So, looking at the Saints, obviously, did not play this week. Nothing to say about them. They're hanging tight where they are. They are right on the edge of that toilet bowl, ready to fall in. Commanders right above them. I do want to give some credit where it's due, especially for the defense and keeping this game tight and kind of hanging on for dear life, because Devon Achane was having himself a pretty solid performance in this game here, but they did a really good job of keeping this game close. And the offense over there with Marcus Mariota at the helm and obviously missing some players on top of that, it was not pretty. It was not great. And it's a real shame that you were able to potentially win this football game coming off of a weird decision for Miami to not take points and not set you up in a situation where, you're going into overtime if Washington goes down and ultimately makes the field goal that Matt Gay missed. It's a real shame that that's how that kind of played itself out. And then ultimately you go into overtime, Marcus Mariota finally makes a mistake, and it's one that literally costs you the game. I do think that this team deserves some credit for keeping the fight that they have here and pushing through. It's wildly disappointing that that's kind of how things shook out for the Commanders there, because I honestly thought that it would be a little bit more lopsided to Miami's side, but for what it's worth, Washington did a great job hanging on in that early game. Bengals right above them. Dead offense aside, and just what it feels like the final implosion of this Bengals team, and somehow, some way, everyone's supposed to get excited for the return of Joe Burrow in another 2, maybe 3 weeks, when at that point the season's over. What are you even bringing him back for at that point, other than just to try to get some reps in? I don't really know. I understand he's QB1, but this season feels like it's dead in the water at this point here. And the big takeaway, obviously, being Jamar Chase getting himself suspended, and now he's not going to be in the fold against the New England Patriots this upcoming week. And that kind of kills the season, because I will say this. I was at the very least intrigued with Cincinnati hosting the Patriots, having a quarterback in Joe Flacco, who, depending on the week, can have himself a really good performance with a T. Higgins and a Jamar Chase at the helm working alongside him. But now that it's just going to be T. Higgins and this rushing attack that for whatever reason has only actually found success running the football against what feels like the Steelers this season, there's nothing about this Bengals team that makes me feel like they can come away with a win in that game now. And other than the fact that it's just at home and anything can happen on any given Sunday, like talk about putting your team in an awful spot where you're 3-7. In theory, if you win out the rest of your games and you win the next, 2 or so, however long it takes for Joe Burrow to get back and then just keep on winning from that point forward, you could, in theory, finish the season 10-7, 9-8, maybe sneak into the playoffs, depending on how things in the AFC shake out. But right now, it seems a little too top-heavy for that to happen. That just felt like the nail in the coffin of the season. And that's a shame that that's the story coming out of this with Joe Burrow so close to potentially making his return, that you're talking about your star wide receiver getting himself suspended for spitting on somebody. Like, it's just ridiculous. Cardinals right above them. I feel like this is very easy to do every single week, and I'm just going to kind of keep doing it because you keep going back to that loss against Tennessee. And I called it from the week that happened, and I'll keep bringing it up as we go forward throughout the season. That loss to the Titans, that collapse to the Titans, where you handed away the singular victory that Titans team owns to this point in the season still, is what killed this team's season. And Jacoby Brissett, doing everything he can, literally breaking the completions record in this losing effort here, trying to keep this team alive as he throws 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions because the run game was just absolutely dead in the water. You have to start to wonder now at this point with how things are kind of shaken out, and it's getting kind of ugly because this is the second week in a row now that we've seen Arizona put up 22 points and allow over 40. I wonder if Jonathan Gannon's job is potentially starting to get a little warm and if he's potentially on the hot seat. It's a little too early for it, but you now have what sounds like a Kyler Murray benching even though he's injured. The Jacoby Brissett thing is not working out. So at some point, if this keeps trending in the wrong direction after what looked kind of solid for the first few weeks that he was starting during Kyler Murray's initial absence from his injury, if it just keeps going south, you can't just ignore the fact that he kind of alluded to the fact that Kyler Murray's being benched, like we're going forward with Jacoby Brissett as a starter now. That just calls into question more of his decision-making, and it feels like there's a chance, and a real chance, that we're looking at a new head coach in Arizona come next season. Falcons above them. I hate doing this, but it just feels like this team in blowing leads is kind of just synonymous at this point here. 21-7, of course, lead. Offense starts to stall out. Eventually, you're losing Drake London and Michael Penix to injuries as the game works itself on as well. And a pass defense that at one point literally looked like it was the best in the NFL and absolutely folding to Bryce Young, who I admittedly am not the highest person on in the world, and we'll talk about him more in a moment when we get to the Panthers, but that is just not the game that I expected to play out in the slightest. And, now Kirk Cousins is quarterback 1, and I have this joking theory right now that it feels like Kirk Cousins, every time he's called upon to play for Atlanta since he's been benched for Michael Penix, feels like he's purposely trying to lose football games and he has no real incentive to keep playing, because what are the odds he's landing another big contract at this stage in his career with how the performances have looked for him? It feels like he's just riding it out and giving a middle finger to Falcons ownership with some of the ways he plays at this point in his career. And that's all in jest. It's just kind of a funny joke, but at the same time, like, is it really? So listen, this team with Michael Penix now potentially done for the season and a defense that is starting to show some cracks as the offense continues to fail. 3-8 has never felt more like a done season, in my opinion, for a team. Dolphins above them, 4-7, still looking at ugly records here. 2 different opportunities at the goal line to punch in some points, and the second time around you're doing this, I don't really know if I agree with the decision to go for the touchdown. I understand you're trying to put the Commanders in a situation where they have to score a touchdown to get it to overtime as opposed to having to settle for a field goal to get it to overtime, but your decision to go for it on 4th down after failing not too long before that in a very similar situation nearly cost you the game. Like, be blessed or feel blessed and send a thank you card to Matt Gay and to Marcus Mariota, who gave you that interception in overtime, for helping you win that football game, because you allow Washington, after that whole situation plays out, to drive down to the field, get into field goal range, and Matt Gay's got a leg. Like, he can kick. It's unfortunate he missed, but the Dolphins should feel pretty lucky that they came away with a victory overseas this past week. Cowboys right above them to round out the category. CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, how about them serving a one-drive suspension courtesy of their head coach due to, it sounds like a missed curfew from the sounds of it. They, being in Las Vegas, enjoying yourself in Las Vegas. Sounds like they missed curfew. That's just the rumors that I kind of came across. I don't necessarily know how legitimate that all is or not. I didn't really look into it that hard. But whether or not this defense improved in Dallas, because yes, obviously offense looked really good, and it's good to see that, especially, and you're looking at a Raiders team that really is not looking too hot to this stage in the season. Whether or not the defense improved is the question I'm asking coming out of that game, because obviously they looked really good against a Raiders team that is, having a hard time getting out of its own way, let alone letting opponents get in their way. But you obviously have to acknowledge the addition now of Quinnen Williams. Also on top of that, DeMarvion Overshown rejoining the team after missing basically the first half of the season to this point. And obviously a lot of emotion, a lot of drive, and a lot of motivation pushing this team to want to get a win for Marshawn Nealon after his unfortunate passing last week. I'll be very curious to see how this group looks going forward, because I admittedly, I kind of like the Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams additions now to this defensive line. I don't necessarily know if I agree with the compensation that had to be given up to get it there, but you got to feel a little bit better about this defense going forward. Ultimately, again, it was the Raiders. We'll see how much of this was just more so we're playing the Raiders as it was just actual improvement for the defense. But good step in the right direction, and that's basically what I said about this game. Like, you have a good opportunity coming into it as the Dallas Cowboys to kind of try to right the ship in a couple of different ways. An offense that was kind of flustering the last few weeks, and a defense, obviously, that has looked as bad as it has all season long. This was the exact type of game you wanted to have going into Monday Night Football and coming out of it. Looking at the Jeff Fisher 500 Club, and I'll be honest, to start the bottom of this category, we have the Vikings at 4-6, and we'll get to that in a second. I'm not really sure how I feel about leaving them there, but I'm giving them some benefit of the doubt. The Panthers right above them, followed by the Chiefs, the Jaguars, the Texans, and then the Lions. Rounding out the category, Bears fans rejoice as your team has finally made itself beyond this 500 Club that I've had them in for quite some time. That being said, the Vikings at 4-6. I'm giving Kevin O'Connell and the defense in Minnesota and Brian Flores some benefit of the doubt here in being able to keep this team competitive, because they've been in some really close games with some really good teams this season. But my goodness, I could not be more out on J.J. McCarthy. I've been very, very uncertain about how I felt about him to this point in the season, but at this rate, it's glaringly obvious that it feels like it's not going to work, and I know it's very early in his career, but the mistakes are just way too consistent for me to feel like at some point this turns around. I could be wrong, and I'll eat my words when that day comes if it happens, but you had Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones in the building last season, and this is kind of what you're working with, and it's clear the frustration. It's probably boiling over, not just in game, but outside of games as well. I feel like you see the expression and you see the emotion coming off of Justin Jefferson, the best at what he does, an elite competitor, a guy who can bring it with the best of them. And I understand it's not been a great season. And I understand, obviously, the connection is not there, and that's got to be frustrating. But the fact that I feel like we have more of Justin Jefferson slamming his helmet down somewhere than we do seeing him catch balls every single week is starting to feel like this is something that's extending beyond just games. And I would not be shocked if behind closed doors it's happening in practice too, and like that frustration is really starting to boil over. We'll see where this team goes. They still have a good head coach, good defensive coordinator, good defense to work with, and a lot of skill talent on the offensive side of the ball. But when your quarterback is throwing interceptions the way J.J. McCarthy is, at the rate that J.J. McCarthy is, I don't know. I just don't know. Panthers above them, got to give some credit where it's due to Bryce Young. And like I said earlier, admittedly, I am not a Bryce Young believer. unfortunately, it's way too hot and cold for me. We've seen some really high highs from him, but we've seen some really low lows, and that's continued this season as well. Despite all the pressure he faced, though, getting sacked 5 times and finding yourself down in a hole, 14 points against this Atlanta defense that up until you started finding success, a lot of people were pointing at going, one of the best defenses against the pass, to put up nearly 450 yards and do what he did. I've got to tip my cap to that and show some respect to that there. And on top of that, the other person I've got to show some serious love to is Tet McMillan, because he's someone that, as working in the New England sports media myself, I've done a lot more research on Tet than I'd want to admit because of my day job, and the conversation surrounding him and some of the what felt like downright slander that Tet McMillan dealt with because of his lack of speed, because of his 40 time and everything. And I've even talked about this before as on the show, being like, it feels kind of manufactured, like teams were trying to drag him down in the draft to land him. And based off a lot of recent reporting that is surfacing about the draft, a lot of teams wanted him. He went really high in the draft, and it sounds like a lot of teams were trying to trade up for him as well. So for someone who took a lot of dirt and slander on his name because of his 40 speed and people trying to drag him down for the opportunity to get them themselves, it's great to see him thriving the way he is, and he's opening things up for Xavier Legette as well. So that could be something that's brewing in Carolina, and I'm kind of excited to see. And one of those things where if I wind up being wrong about this Bryce Young thing, and a lot of it has to do with Tet McMillan and Xavier Legette finding success together, fine, I'll eat my words. But I like what we're seeing so far. It's exciting stuff. Whether I'm bought in or not doesn't really matter. I still respect and acknowledge what's going on over there. Chiefs right above them at 5-5. This offense just lacks any sort of big play burst. I mean, yes, you get like the occasional big play from Tyquan Thornton, and you got the 61-yard boom of a play from him in this one here, but that also feels like the problem with this offense. And I understand Isaiah Pacheco is missing in this matchup as well, but those 61-yard plays that you're getting from Tyquan Thornton, you want to be getting from Rashee Rice and from Xavier Worthy. And the fact that Tyquan Thornton is like the big deep play threat guy, when you have somebody with the legs of Xavier Worthy and somebody in Rashee Rice who is quite the athlete himself, it just feels like you are not getting the level of play from some of these top flight guys that you have, and them not reaching the expectations you may have of them. And it feels like the magic and fear of this Chiefs team is kind of going away, and Denver feels like they almost ripped it right out of them in this matchup. Listen, this is a big correction because I had the Chiefs smack in the middle of playoff hopefuls as recently as last week, but I did not anticipate Denver coming away with that win. And maybe that's me just letting the Kansas City mystique cloud my judgment a little too long. I didn't expect to see that game play out the way it did, where the defense of Denver just gave them problems all game long. Obviously, the defense of Kansas City continues to be a strength for this team and will be a reason why they're going to be in every single game. I don't think anyone's going to run away with a contest against them, but this offense is flawed right now, and it is not good. Jaguars above them. Speaking of flawed offenses here, I will say this. What's going on with the passing attack over there is not conducive of a team that's going to go very far should they make the playoffs. And respectfully, to give them respect, as things currently stand, they are in the playoffs, I believe, as the number 7 seed. So that being said, if Baishal Tutin and Travis Etienne can really get going on the ground consistently, that could at least mitigate some of those issues there. The passing attack, though, is something I can't get away from. Defensively, we're seeing some good improvement here. This is probably the best game we've seen from the Jacksonville Jaguars pass rush as a whole, going for 16 pressures and 3 sacks, according to Next Gen Stats. And on top of that, the way that run defense has been looking basically all season. And, you know, in this matchup here, the storyline, of course, if you want to write this out a little bit, you have Kamani Vidal coming in the relief, of course, Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton, who are missing for the Chargers, has been finding some decent success on the ground. He's been pretty good for them out of the backfield. It ran into a brick wall that is the Jacksonville Jaguars run defense. So not a perfect team by any stretch of the imagination. And I know that some Jaguars fans are probably going to see this and go, well, we're a playoff team right now. How are we not a playoff hopefuls? It's just, I unfortunately still don't buy this team. Like, yeah, they're 6-4, but I think it's a fairly flawed 6-4. And I'll be interested to see where this team actually ends up when it's all said and done. Texans above them, squeaking by on the back of your defense against that Tennessee Titans team. This was kind of the game I expected. I would have thought that maybe Houston would come away with a few more points and not have it come down to a last-second game-winning field goal. But Davis Mills, at this stage in his career, really smart guy. You can count on him to operate your offense. There's a reason he's been around as the backup for as long as he has in Houston. And it's just one of those things where you're not going to get too much out of him, but he won't completely blow a game for you, and you needed your defense to carry you the way they did in this. So, like, the game itself kind of playing out, I wasn't too surprised. And if I'm remembering correctly, I feel like my final score for this game was like 20-10. So the fact that we got like a 16-13 finish, really not too crazy in my opinion. I will be curious, though, because it sounds like there's a real possibility that it's Davis Mills going on Thursday Night Football this week against the Bills. That could be a problem for Houston. We will see what happens there. Obviously, we have another day or two before things get sorted out and we figure out who's starting at quarterback, but it sounds like it's going to be Davis Mills again. Don't know if that's going to be enough against this Buffalo team. Lions above them to round out the category. I am starting to have some serious concern and doubt surrounding this team and their long-term success, at least this season. First of all, every shot we saw on the sideline, that Lions team looked like they were not prepared for the cold and that weather. And Detroit outside of their dome this time of year does already scare me. And it feels like it's somewhat of a flaw for this team as it stands. Couple that with the fact that if this team cannot run the football, they simply have no offense, because it feels like you can't just drop back and pass with Jared Goff is another bit of a massive flaw for this offense here. And I don't think it's a coincidence that some of Detroit's losses this season, or a majority of their losses this season, have come with the fact that they could not run the football effectively. They could not open up the play action. And it comes into a situation where just Jared Goff is dropping back and passing and it's not working. This is a team that over their last 6 games is 500, just flip-flopping wins and losses, and coming off of what was an initially strong start to the season where you just had one ugly loss to the Green Bay Packers. I don't know. This doesn't feel like the Detroit Lions of last year. I thought going into that game, maybe they had figured something out with Dan Campbell calling the plays the week prior, but those flaws of being an indoor team and struggling in the cold weather, and if you can't run the ball, the offense can't operate properly, those flaws are starting to get ugly, and they're starting to be more and more noticeable each loss that goes by for this Lions team. Going into the playoff hopefuls, and the reminder as always, 7 AFC teams, 7 NFC teams, a division winner from all 8 divisions, plus 3 wildcard teams from each conference. We start at the bottom of the group with the Chargers taking a bit of a slide here after their ugly loss to the Jaguars. Bears right above them, followed by the Ravens, the Steelers, the Packers, the 49ers, the Buccaneers, and then the Buffalo Bills rounding out the category. I was taking a look at some other power rankings, and it's clear that I'm a little bit lower on them than some other people. Chargers. I know Justin Herbert had to leave this game. I mean, at that point, I don't really think it mattered much because it felt like that game was kind of already lost as it stood, but I completely expected that Justin Herbert was going to be able to dice up this Jacksonville Jaguars defense. And I understand the offensive line situation and what they're dealing with over there, but it's not like Jacksonville's pass rush by any means it's like the most impressive group in the NFL right now. And I figured if there was a pass rush you wanted to face where you still felt like you could drop back and throw the football, I would have expected Jacksonville to be that team. But between the struggles on offense and the defense just kind of being folded in half by the run game over there in Jacksonville, what the hell happened? Even if it was like a tight loss, it would have made some more sense because you go, okay, yeah, offensive line issues and blah, 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 blah. But no, you weren't even prepared for this one is kind of how that game looked when it was all said and done. Not a great look. Time will tell what this Chargers team actually is. And the offensive line concerns that everyone's kind of discussed to this point in the season are very real. And it's something that going up against some of the better pass rushes as the season moves along, it's not like things are getting easier for the Chargers as things currently stand in their schedule. Bears right above them finally getting out of the Jeff Fisher club, I had to put some respect on this team because they have been well above 500 for a while, but I was keeping them out because the team's in front of them. But we gave the Lions the boot. The Bears are now here, and they lead the NFC North, everybody. That being said, the offense just needs to start finding the end zone more consistently for me. I cannot stress that enough. And it's one of those reasons why I don't have them a little bit higher in this group here. 5 field goals attempted in this game here. You came away with 4 of them made. You were a missed field goal away from Minnesota's late touchdown not even mattering in this game, but ultimately it did matter. This is now the 6th game where this defense, though, and this is where all the praise needs to go. As much as I love what Ben Johnson's trying to do and unlock this offense for Caleb Williams, this defense is aggressive, and they know how to find the football, and they take risks and make plays on those calculated risks. They lead the league in takeaways with 22, but this is now the 6th game where they've had multiple takeaways in a football contest, and that defense is a massive reason why this Bears team, as opposed to losing one-possession matchups, is coming away with wins in one-possession matchups. So really fun team to watch. I just need to see those field goals and those drives that are ending the way they are turned into touchdowns. Give me some of that, and I think this Bears team has something special brewing. Ravens right above them. Welcome to the playoff hopefuls category as well. Winners of now, I believe it's 4 straight, if I'm remembering correctly, because I believe they were 1-5 at their worst. So winners of 4 straight now, and classic Ravens football, watching their defense win this football game here. I'm not going to hold this super tight contest against the Browns against them like some other people might. And if you watched my preview for that game, you'd understand why. AFC North games in Cleveland are wild to watch, and they're always ridiculously close. And over the last 5 seasons, the Browns are 11-6 at home against the AFC North. Going into that game, they were 11-5. So it's not too crazy for this game to have looked the way it did, to have came and finished the way it did. And honestly, had Cleveland came away and stolen that victory, I wouldn't have been too shocked about that either. Cleveland gives the AFC North their best punches at home, and it's impressive the way they're able to do it. No matter the state of the Browns, which is not pretty very often, they're always able to take it to their AFC North rivals here. So I'm not super surprised this game played out the way it did, especially on the defensive side for Cleveland. But the Ravens, all about that defense, even in a game where Lamar Jackson threw a couple of interceptions and did not have nearly his best game by any means. They allowed both of the QBs that came into this one here to complete just 11 passes. Quinshaw Judkins, who I call constantly the engine of the Browns offense, you were able to shut him down as well, holding him to 3.5 yards per attempt. And then Derrick Henry making up for what was a lackluster round number 1 against the Cleveland Browns earlier this season, had himself quite an answer, and finally a response to what Grant Delpit had to say earlier in the season about not being worried about tackling Derrick Henry. Things obviously working a little bit more in Derrick Henry's favor this time around here. But ultimately, a Ravens hard-nosed football style of win. This team is going to continue to win football games with great defense or with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and that offense making those massive plays the way they can. I'm not really too worried about how tight this game was. It's always like that in the AFC North, especially when the games are in Cleveland. For whatever the reason it is, the football gods like to smile on the Browns against their division rivals in the AFC North. And even if they're not giving them wins, they're letting them fight tooth and nail to the finish line to basically make their rivals sweat it out to the very finish. Steelers right above them. Good win for the Steelers, especially the defense. This was a really good response and answer to the original matchup that they had against the Cincinnati Bengals, where, I'll be honest, a lot of people felt like that Steelers defense might get torched again, and for good reason. But you go into this one here, you come away with the win. The defense looks really good. Your offense looks pretty good as well. But now you have this fear of what's going on with Aaron Rodgers and what sounds like a fracture in his wrist, his left wrist, so thankfully not his throwing wrist. I'll be curious to see if he ends up missing any time here, because the way some of the verbiage sounds from what we're hearing based off the reporting, you throw a cast on that thing, keep it stabilized. Other than like taking the snap underneath center, which is one of those things where if you start playing more of the shotgun is less of an issue on top of that. It sounds like he could be playing as soon as this week. Maybe you give him a week off and you're leaning on Mason Rudolph for a week. Not the most ideal of situations, because I feel like we all know what Mason Rudolph is at this point here, but someone who can operate this Steelers offense, in my opinion, to a level solid enough. It's just you're going to have to lean on your defense. We'll see, but good response, good answer, especially after what was an ugly loss last week for Pittsburgh. Definitely going up against a division rival too in the Cincinnati Bengals and an offense that torched your defense the first time around. This was very much a great rebuttal to that. Packers right above them. Not a great win and just ugly performance overall. I obviously need to respect the fact that Jordan Love had to exit the game here. He eventually returned. Then Josh Jacobs, of course, exited the game. He did not return, and it sounds like we need to keep an eye on that potential injury and just how long-term that is for Josh Jacobs here. But scraping past the Giants, man, and the situation that they're in, I would have expected that defense to give Jameis Winston and company a hell of a worse time than they did. And for the game to come down the way it did, as close it was to the finish line, like 20 points isn't obviously a lot to allow. It's the NFL. Things like that happen. I just would have expected a more convincing win from the Packers in this one here. But the Giants are feisty, so they gave the Packers a good punch. Wasn't enough. Packers get the job done. I'm not going to complain too much. A win is a win ultimately, and that's all that really matters. Whether they're ugly or not does not really matter. But 6-3-1 for the Packers, well in the thick of things in the race in the NFC North and in the NFC as a whole. 49ers above them. Brock Purdy making his return, throwing for 200 yards and 3 scores and not throwing a singular interception as well. He's back and honestly kind of looked like the quarterback that helped guide this team to the Super Bowl a few years ago. That just beautiful throw he had to George Kittle into the end zone. I mean, that is everything you could have hoped for, I believe, for 49ers fans. I would have to imagine you see that, you go, oh my God, we're so back right now. Couple that with the fact that the defense, for all the injuries they have on the defensive side of the football, I mean, made life hell for Jacoby Brissett in that game, completely shut down the run as the Cardinals could not get anything going. Like I said, Jacoby Brissett got forced into completing the most passes in NFL history in a singular game. So it is what it is, but that defense looked really good. And now this team, with its quarterback back in the fold, defense, if it can just hang on, and some of these guys that are filling in getting more and more comfortable with now a starting role, because a lot of the guys that were lost for the season and they need to get comfortable, they're ready to make a playoff push. And shout out Mac Jones, man. This team, 6-4 coming into the game, coming out of it now 7-4. Dude deserves a lot of credit for keeping this team afloat and in a position where they can actually make a run towards the playoffs. Buccaneers right above them. I'm not as worried, I think, as some other people might be regarding this Buccaneers team and ultimately just the losses that they've now been dealt the last couple of weeks. I will say this. With Bucky Irving returning soon, and it sounds like Chris Godwin is either on pace or not too far behind Bucky Irving into returning at the same time. Once that gets going and those guys are both back on the football field, I think we'll be seeing the far truer version of what this Buccaneers offense is supposed to look like and what this team is going to look like as a whole. Wasn't a great game defensively as Josh Allen just basically took over and did his thing. But I will say I'm not too worried about the Bucs. It's just a matter of them getting their guys back. They've been so banged up offensively, missing so many key skill guys. And credit to Sean Tucker and to Rashad White, because the way they ran the football against Buffalo, they gave this team a shot. They did. And the score, while it may look a little wide, what was it, 44-32 if I'm remembering correctly? I mean, it was one of those games where the Bills were putting them away late and they hung on for as long as they could. But the way Josh Allen's playing right now, tough team to keep up with offensively if your defense isn't getting stops. That is a little bit of a concern, but for the most part, I haven't had too many issues with the Bucs defense. So again, not too worried about this team, especially with key offensive players making a return soon. Bills above them, like I just kind of touched on with the Buccaneers here, Josh Allen, man, if you needed a reminder about him and why he is the current reigning MVP and why he should be in the conversation for back-to-back MVPs, 6 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 3 on the ground, basically taking the game over and just continuing to shine. I mean, what he's doing right now with the cast that he is working with is just so impressive. Like, yes, you have James Cook right now, but Dalton Kincaid is hurt. And on top of that, Keon Coleman was a healthy scratch in this game here. So your number 1 overall selection at wide receiver, or first round selection, I should say, at wide receiver, just a couple of seasons ago, if I'm remembering correctly. It's the second season, right? Yeah. So a couple of seasons ago, for him to be a healthy scratch as well, your lead guys are Khalil Shakir and James Cook. And while Shakir is a nice possession receiver, a guy that's going to catch the ball more times than not, You don't have that top-tier talent. You don't have a Jamar Chase hanging out in your wide receiver room or a T. Higgins hanging out in your wide receiver room. There's no Justin Jeffersons or anything like that. Hell, he doesn't even have like a Stephon Diggs like the Patriots do, although he did at one point. There's so much praise you could throw on Josh Allen, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and just praise him all day. I will say this, though. I am concerned about this defense because, like I just mentioned, with Sean Tucker and Rachaad White having themselves a day, the two backup running backs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this run defense has got to figure it out. You're not going to keep getting away with wins like this. It's just one of those things where it's exciting watching Josh Allen throw on the cape and doing what he does best. Unfortunately, that is not conducive of winning championships. The defense has got to figure it out and has got to tighten it up, especially against the run. As the season drags on and we get into these colder months, the tougher run defenses, you want to be one of those units there because teams start to throw less, they start to run the football more, and you've got to be able to take care of the football because while Josh Allen did have 6 touchdowns, he had a couple of interceptions as well in this game here. So you've got to be able to find a way to stop the run and not put yourself in a position where Josh Allen has to put up 6 touchdowns like this to win a football game. It's exciting in doses. It's not something you want to see consistently. To round it all out, at the top of the NFL, Super Bowl contenders with some good shuffling going on around here. Starting at the bottom, dropping from number 1 down to number 6. Seattle Seahawks, man. Tough loss, and we'll talk about why such a steep drop in a second here. Patriots right above them. Broncos, Colts, Rams, and then at the top of the list, the reigning defending Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. So the Seattle Seahawks, listen, I love their defense. Jackson Smith-Njigba is playing like the best wide receiver in the NFL. I have the running game is really good with Kenneth Walker as well. Like, I have so much praise I could heap on this team. The 4 interceptions from Sam Darnold, though, is a literal nightmare coming to life for this Seattle Seahawks team. It's one game. I'm not going to sit here and act like the season is over for Seattle. By no means no, because we've seen so much good from Sam Darnold. But this offensive line was allowing the pressure to get to Darnold. He looked uncomfortable, and he was clearly uncomfortable. And when he gets uncomfortable, he folds and makes boneheaded mistakes. And we saw it against this Rams pass rush and that Rams secondary, feasting on Sam Darnold's mistakes. I will say that I think this team is going to be okay as the season progresses. Again, defense, unbelievable unit over there. They made Matthew Stafford look mortal in that game, and he's been playing out of his mind for the last month or so. They did a really solid job in containing Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, who've been a threatening 1-2 punch at wide receiver. So this is still an extremely good football team. That scared me, though. And that's one of those things that everyone's kind of been waiting for in this situation here. And you know, in my eyes, or my head rather, I was kind of in the camp of maybe we'll get a 2 interception, maybe a 3 interception game that just does not look great from Sam. But man, 4 picks is basically the difference. It is the difference in this game here. You scratch off even one of those turnovers and Seattle can net 3 more points, maybe a touchdown more, and we're having a vastly different conversation about the Cardinals right now. Or excuse me, the Seahawks rather. Wrong bird team. Excuse me, Seahawks fans. Did not mean to insult you like that. Patriots right above them. Rookie running back Travion Henderson, 3 touchdowns in this game, getting into a real good groove, which is honestly bad for the rest of the league, as Ramondre Stevenson continues on the mend here, trying to get himself back in the fold. Travion Henderson now being unleashed over the last few weeks and catching fire the way people were hoping, and we saw flashes of during the preseason, a la that very first kickoff return he had to kick things off. That is kind of a nightmare for everyone else that's playing this team because Drake May and the offense continues to just absolutely roll. And even if they do have their slow starts, they play mistake-free football. They're very, very rarely ever turning the football over. And now you have a situation where when Ramondre Stevenson comes back, yes, the fumbling issues were a concern early in the season and stretching back for a while now beyond this past season. But he seemed to have cleaned it up prior to missing a few games with injury. If you now have the 1-2 power speed punch of Ramondre and Travion's fresh, he has not been getting utilized the way Patriots fans have wanted to. I've heard the cries of Patriots fans all season long. You're finally now seeing him get unleashed with fresh legs, and you're going into week 12 of the season. that is a bit of a nightmare for all these people that are sitting here doubting the Patriots and just shouting about strength of schedule. It's tough to win football games in the NFL. It's easy to look at numbers and go strength of schedule this, strength of schedule that. Ask anyone who plays in the league, and I'm sure they'll tell you the same thing. A win in the NFL is a win in the NFL. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Defense is also choking the life out of offenses. Yeah, they have that issue of letting teams score on the opening drive. But beyond that, man, I am a little bit concerned regarding the loss of Milton Williams and how much time he may miss, but I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy. He should be back sooner rather than later, it sounds. But man, oh man, is this team just firing on all cylinders. Mike Vrabel's pushing all the right buttons, and everyone is playing good, clean, mistake-free football, and that will win you football games in this league. Broncos right above them killed off the mystique of the Kansas City Chiefs, if I do say so myself. Listen, I will say this, and I did a little bit of a correction on the Broncos for this week's power rankings. If for those of you obviously watching, I'm sure you saw from where they were initially to where they jumped up this week here, and I even had them leapfrog a few teams. I am very uneasy about the consistency of the offense and just how many points they're actually able to put up on any given Sunday. But Bo Nix, for what it's worth, is a gamer, and that's something that I've said, something I've heard a lot of other people say for plenty of time now to this point in his career in the NFL. He finds ways to win when he needs to and puts together scoring drives when he absolutely needs to. You take that and you back it up with an unbelievable defense that, mind you, hasn't had Patrick Surtain for I think like 2 weeks now. I can't remember exactly when he got hurt, but he's been missing for a little bit now. And you're still just completely just locking down opposing offenses. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, the pass rush that they have over there in Denver is ludicrous right now with the pace that they're currently on, potentially breaking the season record for set team sacks in a single season. And they could potentially do it by the 16th game. Like, they wouldn't even need that extra 17th game to do so if they keep moving at the pace they're going. So as long as they keep on playing excellent defense, which I have no reason to think at this stage in the season they won't be able to do so, this is what the defense is. They are going to choke the life out of the opposing offenses. And when Patrick Surtain gets back, it's only going to be better. Coupled with an offense that does a solid job taking care of the football. It's not pretty always, but Bo Nix manages to put it together in the fourth quarter. That luck can run out, and that does scare me. So basically, we're at the point now where it's just, does that luck run out? We'll see. The only way we'll find out is by watching these games play. But I've got to give the respect to this Denver Broncos team, man. They are just so good right now. Colts right above them did not play this week. Don't really have a ton to say on them. I've said what I've had to say about them last week, so we'll just leave that at that. Sitting at the number 3 spot. Rams right above them. Offense running into a bit of a brick wall against Seattle's defense. Like I mentioned earlier, probably the most mortal Matthew Stafford has looked in about a month with the way he's been slinging the rock. But I don't really... That's more credit to the Seattle Seahawks defense more than anything else. That's a really good unit they have over there. And I mean, even in that, Rams still found the end zone 3 times. They were still able to get the W in the game, so it's not like I'm not too worried about it. For that game to play out the way it did, you have 2 really good defenses going head-to-head. Defenses, when they're playing that good, will win out more than not, and they did so against this Rams offense that, again, still found its way into the end zone enough to get the W. I got to give some major credit to the Rams defense, though, man, for the pass rush and what they were able to do with Byron Young and Jared Verse coming off the edges the way they are. It's just so much fun to watch because it's such a young group as well. Like, you look across that entire defensive front, and it's just guys that are like mid-20s at best, something in that ballpark. And the secondary itself, pretty young as well. You have some older corners there, but like your safety tandem's a very young couple of guys as well. So it's like you have a very, very, very young defense that is really growing into its own this season, and it's really fun to watch. One of the better pass rushes in the NFL, and a secondary that's not afraid to get after the football. And again, they made Sam Darnold's life a living hell in this matchup here. So Rams as rounded out and as good as just about any team in the NFL, in my opinion. And to wrap it up, the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not pretty. There is drama surrounding Philadelphia, but there is just way too much talent on this team for me to not sit here and look at them and go, this is probably the best team in the NFL. There is a case to be made for the Rams, surely. There is a case to be made for the Colts, surely. If you want to throw in the the Denver Broncos as well, because they have a win over the Eagles. Surely there's a conversation to be made. However, for them to be navigating the drama that is going on right now and still winning football games, that is the sign of a tested team that knows how to win. And I'd be hard-pressed to pick another team with a straight face and put them over Philadelphia right now. And on top of that, you watch the game in action Sunday night against the Lions, and it was clear they're trying to smooth this issue over with A.J. Brown. He just wants to be a part of this offense and help this team win. They get him 7 receptions in the matchup. The defense also, on top of that, feels like it's really starting to settle in and find itself over the last 3 or 4 games, which is a problem because I do still look at this Eagles defense on paper as one of the most talented defenses in the NFL. And they've had some things go their way in terms of getting Brandon Graham back and trading for a Jalen Phillips to help bolster up a pass rush that obviously lost a lot of talent this past offseason. This Eagles team is rounding into form. And if they can settle this A.J. Brown issue that they have going on, I really have no issues with this team at this point. They're winning every single week. The defense has figured it out. Jalen Hurts has won this game with his arm. The Eagles have won football games running the football as well. I don't know what else you could really ask from that team. So I'm good with the Eagles for now, sitting atop of the league as things currently stand. But those are my rankings going into week number 12. As always, comment down below. Let me hear. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your rankings? Would love to see your top 5, top 10 if you disagree. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I will see you all tomorrow to preview Thursday Night Football action as we get ready for week number 12 of the NFL. So until next time, have a good one.